What is up, people? It is Dave, it is Duncan, it is Kyle up here, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan, Kyle and I have been checking out the new album from Swedish metal band Tungsten. The band's new album Bliss will be released on June 17th via A Rising Empire. So, gentlemen, only formed in 2016, Tungsten. But this is album number 3 from the Swedes. Yeah, been busy guys.
Were they in bands before? Do we know?
I don't know for sure. I'm assuming so, but I don't know for sure.
Because they sound very accomplished.
Yeah.
Regardless of your persuasion when it comes to the style of music that they play here, they're all pretty proficient. So kind of feels like this is maybe a group made up of people that have done a lot of other things elsewhere and then come together.
Quite possibly, yeah. Bliss was recorded at Harm Studios, Trelleborg in Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
Don't know if that's pronounced right. Nick Johansson once again took care of mixing, mastering and production duties, with the album's artwork taken care of by Andreas Marshall. We reacted to one of these tracks from the album.
So long ago now.
I know, it feels like a while ago. Come This Way was the track. Went into it knowing pretty much nothing really. And I'm not, like I'd said on the reaction, I'm not the biggest power metal fan at all.
Well, there's so much recorded evidence against that now. So.
I know but for some reason there was just something about that track that really just hooked me in. The big kind of stomping grooves, which I was not expecting. Huge vocal hooks, and I was pretty much sold on that track right there and then, to be honest. There was also like a little bit of a kind of like folky, kind of almost kind of piratey vibe, kind of in there as well.
The thing of it is it doesn't help that it's played on. I think it's a synth that's emulating a flute sound, which doesn't help.
The flute.
Which doesn't make it.
We'll get back to the flute. Don't worry.
Several appearances on this album, so I don't know if they have a flautist amongst them.
It's certainly not mentioned in the press release anyway.
I'm going to assume it's synthesized.
Could be. So to be honest, I didn't even really mind it on that track at all. It was balanced out well enough that I didn't mind.
Didn't mind it on that track. See how he said that? I didn't mind it on that track, is what he just said there. He said on that ladies and gents, is foreboding. It's a foreshadow for a later comment.
As each single was released from the album, to be honest, I seem to be kind of more and more on board with this. Duncan, you were extremely excited in the group chat about these singles.
I think the thing is, like, the danger is that, from listening to something like Come This Way, the danger is that you, from just that single and knowing that they were kind of power metal-y, and I think even in that reaction, I think Kyle said it's got a kind of pirate metal vibe, and that instantly, I mean, whilst I liked that track, I was like, I do not want to listen to an entire album of pirate metal.
No.
I think arguably the biggest pirate metal band of all time is Scottish, and they get a lot of buzz about them, and I could not give a fuck about them at all, even a wee bit. And I support pretty much everything that comes from my country, including all the shit that you probably shouldn't. And I just can't get behind it. It's to me, it's a gimmick that overstays its welcome very, very, very quickly, i.e. any more than one song. So I was concerned, and then March Along was the second single, and it comes in with a big old fucking huge stomping riff, and didn't really lean into that. Yeah, it still has synths, but it's not got any of the twee that was in something like Come This Way. And then by the time I think the self-titled single was next, Bliss, which is the heaviest song on the. Well, I might as well just get that out of the way. It's the heaviest fucking song on here, so I can see why they called Bliss. But it came out and it sounded different as well. So I got more excited because it sounded like the same band, but doesn't sound like the same song being played 3 times in a row. So that's where the excitement from my side came in.
What did you make of the rest of it then? How did it kind of match up to those singles?
Surprisingly, its biggest strength is maybe also its biggest weakness. Very much. And I'll put this on. I had a lot of fun with the album, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll get that out of the way just now. I think what they do very, very, very well. I think all the riffs are incredibly hooky and groovy and punchy and stompy. I think the solos are immaculate. I mean, just immaculate. I love the vocals. The vocalist got like a real old school sort of kind of 80s range, which works really, 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 really well. And he predominantly does that throughout everything. Maybe 2 songs out with that, Bliss being one of them, where the vocals are a bit darker, a bit more kind of menacing sounding. Mm-hmm. Keys, for the most part, are used experimentally in terms of they never really stick with one sound more than a song. They do revisit some of those sounds later on, but never for the full song. There is an aforementioned flute that appears, but I want to hear Dave's run on the flute, because it wasn't necessarily all that egregious to me at all. But then I like bands like Dog Fashion Disco who incorporate a lot of those sounds a lot in their songs. So to me, it was, it does. The unfortunate thing is it always will give it a pirate feel. Yeah. It's just that, it's always going to go that way. But I mean, across the board, I think, that they're very, very good at what they do. They can write hooks for days. Like, the melodies on this album are earworms all the way right through it. The downside is that eclectic nature results in almost kind of sporadic changes from track to track that don't feel organic. So, like, my excitement about, well, this song sounds different, this song sounds different, this song sounds different, and the placement of those songs, the tracks were all relatively far apart. But what you get when you listen to the album really is like a power metal take on this, a power metal take on this, a power metal take on this. So the styles don't always organically flow album-wise for me. Some tracks do flow really well into each other's, but others don't. Like, you listen to In the Centre, which is the opening track, which has it is like a box ticking exercise for power metal, and I love it. It's a great opener. Dreamers, which is also a great song, which is track 2, goes off in a different spin. So the synths are more kind of electronic-y, very much more synthy, and not necessarily what I would put as the second track, unless the third track was to carry that on, and it doesn't, because March Along comes along and it's very Rammstein-y, and it's off in a different direction again, and then Heart of Rust comes in and it's more ballady, and then Come This Way kicks in and then it's all cheery. And I think that's none of these songs taken on their own is actually anything that I dislike. I think it's a construct of the album that was kind of, and once again, I don't dislike it. It's just, I kind of felt like there were some tracks being slotted in places where I almost felt their placement was detrimental to either the song that came after or the song that came before. So I think they're doing everything on here, but by doing everything, it kind of lacks a bit of focus, which is weird, because when they're on point, and this is one of these albums, and I very rarely say this, where like a couple of songs in isolation are fucking great, but in the context of the album, I think sometimes the impact of those tracks is lessened by what comes before, or almost amplified by what comes after. So yeah, I think Bliss is like a weird anomaly on the album, in that it is hella dark, kind of almost gothic meets industrial, and it's so different from everything else on here that another 1 or 2 tracks that sound like Bliss, I think, especially because it's your title song as well, it surprises me that's a pick. And it's, it's kind of almost, it's a play on words, in that the Bliss that's being sung about here is against this very dark black kind of backdrop. So I think a little bit more of that. It's power metal, so it's inevitably cheery, and it's difficult not to smile and headbang when listening to it. And the production, I mean, we might as well talk about that as well, is immaculate. The production on this one is absolutely flawless. You hear absolutely every nuance. The guitars are mixed fucking perfectly. Like every note in a guitar solo is crystal clear, drums sound great and punchy, vocals sound amazing and hooky. So it's like all the component parts are really, really well done. I just think the construction of the album is they're either doing maybe one incorporated style too many, or they're a bit sporadic in the placement. But then thinking about this, if this was one of those puzzles, you know, those pictures where there's a bit missing, you have to keep moving things along to make the picture. I was trying to think about this today on my like 8th listen of this album, because it's the easiest one to listen to of the 3 you gave us, Dave. I don't really have to put too much thought into this. I was trying to think about tracks I would try and swap places, and the thing that I came against or butted against several times was like as soon as I move something and move it somewhere else, it actually made the other half of the album a bit weaker, or it made like the back half too strong and the front half too weak. So yeah, I think that's I'm waffling now. For the most part, I really enjoy this album. I really like what the guys are doing. I think there may be a little bit too much, let's throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And everything does stick, but the picture it makes on the wall is maybe not one that I am going to look at a lot. If that makes sense. This is like a horrible analogy. And someone should. This is what happens when we take 3 weeks off. So yeah, I'm like, I enjoy this while I'm listening to it, but there are tracks on here that I think the album would benefit from not having these tracks on. Not because the tracks are bad. It's just that I don't necessarily think they add anything to the album, and if anything, they distract from the elements that work better on other songs. There we are. That was a long way to get to a short sentence.
Nice. Interesting. For someone that doesn't really like power metal,
you love this. I can see it in your face.
I kind of really like power metal.
I think you do. Like, I think the thing is, I think when we think about power metal from our era, Dave, when we think about power metal as we were getting into more metal, the band that springs to mind all the time is Dragon Force, and I cannot stomach Dragon Force at all. I've tried. I've even went back. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. I respect the musicianship. I just find it wanky as fuck. Like like there's a certain point where I'm like, right, we know your virtuoso guitars you're playing is incredible, and I'm so glad that we're listening to solo number 7. like just get back to, and it can be very cheesy, and I think there's a part of that, but I think there's a whole wave of bands, Scandinavian bands as well, that are doing it just now, and kind of, one, making it fun, but 2, doing it a little bit different, also making songs shorter, which power metal needs. Radio length songs, no 8-minute opuses, please. So you are a power metal fan. I can see it in your face.
I'm definitely coming around. I think what kind of sells this album for me is the balance. These guys, there is obviously the power metal cheese is in there. There's no getting away from it. It's definitely on this album. You've also got the kind of like the folky, almost like sea shanty type melodies and instrumentation, but they've got this really cool groove laden side that's like it almost like at times it kind of leans on almost kind of like a cyber metal, or like it reminded me of like a wee bit of like Blinded Colony or Deadlock, and they very like cleverly intersplice the album with those more kind of meaty type tracks to stop the power metal or the kind of folky metal type thing becoming too overpowering. And I think that's what really worked for me. I didn't really have the same issues that you had with the kind of going from track to track. It kind of kept me hooked in, to be honest. Nice. Tracks like March Long have these really like almost kind of like progressive kind of groove riffs that come with the kind of complete the like kind of synced up bass drum patterns with the guitars, like it kind of reminded me of like a more kind of stripped back like Cybreed or something like that. It's not quite as kind of technical, but got a little kind of cyber kind of elements in there.
It reminded me of a heavier Rammstein. Like, if I'm honest, like the riff is of the Rammstein ilk. That's what they do. Like, and you're like, that's like you like. I'm just waiting to hear someone shout about birthday and slap a fake penis off someone's face. That's literally what I'm like when I hear that. But it's so much is because it's detuned as well.
Yeah.
Which is something heavy, you don't often get in power metal,
no,
as guitars is tuned as low as this, but still all the solos and all the rest.
Yeah. Most of the time I think they blend it really well. Tracks like Heart of Rust, has the kind of like the folky melodies, but with that chugging kind of groove behind it, which I really enjoyed. Occasionally I think they let their power metal and folk metal side just kind of flow free. Like On the Sea is like a perfect example of that. It's got that like pirate metal type chanting sing-along chorus, like very theatrical in the vocal delivery, still very catchy, but I have a feeling that type of track might appeal more to the kind of die-hard kind of fans of the band. For me, I listened to it obviously a couple of times as I listened to the album, but the styles on that track were maybe a little bit too potent for my taste. But as I said, when they hit you with one of those type tracks, you can guarantee the next one is going to be loaded with those kind of big groove riffs. And that's exactly what happens after On the Sea. They give you the title track, which is, as you said, a lot darker. It has this almost kind of like industrial vibe in the synths, and again comes with those really kind of razor sharp kind of groove riffs. And I think the riffs in general here are quite a bit heavier than on their previous album, Tundra. Definitely a bit darker, a bit more pronounced and in your face. But I feel like when I listened to the two albums, I felt like everything seems a bit bigger on Bliss, to be honest. I think the hooks are stronger, far more memorable moments on Bliss than there was in the last album. But I think that the biggest selling point for me is the vocals. I think the vocals of
good.
Mike Anderson, I think he has got an unbelievable voice, like great tone, amazing range, like nothing is off the table. He can hit any note, and his choices in melody are excellent on this release. I agree with you in the production. I think the fact they've pushed the guitars just a little bit more definitely gives the album a bit more drive and a bit more weight to it. Drums sound punchy, and the kind of additional instrumentation like the synths and the piano and those kind of like Celtic type sounds, they're not too overpowering in the mix. They do use some of those kind of Celtic type instruments quite a lot, especially that like tin whistle or flute or whatever the hell it is.
No, tug on the old heartstrings, Dave, no.
No, it doesn't really. I think they tend to use it. I noticed that they tend to use it, they kind of like duel up with the vocals a lot. So the melody the vocals are doing, they kind of back it up with that, whatever it is, a whistle or a flute or whatever. Not my favourite instrument, not going to lie, but it kind of comes with the territory. I did feel like it was used quite a lot, and as I said, it's not my favourite kind of sound, but I understand why they use it with that particular style. Obviously, it's used quite a lot. That being said, I enjoyed this album way more than I should have or expected to. Not being like power metal or folk metal is not my go-to at all, but I just think I really enjoyed the balance of this. Those kind of like power metal or folk metal kind of elements, they don't become too intense on the album, which I really liked, and they're backing it up with some really good like metal riffs, which I think made the whole thing easier to digest for me. So I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Kyle, what did you think?
It's an album I listened to recently. I actually enjoyed this just a bit more than I thought I was going to. Listening to when we did that reaction, I was like, "Oh my god!" Not my favorite genre, and I mean, they do what they're doing very, very well. And I got into some of the songs a bit more than I thought I would do. Like even "Afraid of the Light," it's on the back half of the album. It's happy and bouncy and cheery. I'm like, you know what? This is kind of fun. Yeah. When that kind of metal comes on for me, usually I'm like, stop, skip, fuck off.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think I agree with you and Duncan. It's a bit unfocused for me sometimes. It feels like kind of suffers a little bit like maybe they didn't quite know what they wanted to be on this album, so they just threw a lot of stuff in and hoped something would work. And it feels a bit sort of up and down and a bit like what the fuck's coming next, but not in sort of that mind-blowing way. It's a bit like, oh, now you're doing this, what? It's a little bit confusing. So that kind of like, every now and then I'd just be like, okay, he's got a really heavy song, then a really jolly song. Maybe hone it in a little bit. I know they're on album 3, so maybe they just thought, fuck it, we'll do what we want. And I kind of respect that. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit overproduced at times as well. Like, I know you guys said it's very good, but it's like, I don't know, it's a bit too perfect. Like, the guitars are exactly in the spot they're meant to be, and the synths and
isn't that like speaking as a producer as you are, isn't that a gimmick to the genre though? Like,
I'm not sure.
Power metal is all about precision.
No idea. No idea. Because when I think power metal, I think like Gamma Ray and Halloween, and that's really not. That's quite natural.
Yeah, but I think the tech back then wasn't there. I'm thinking about the stuff that we've listened to as of the last. Yeah, but once you're that long in the tooth,
okay, true.
I mean, what? I'm not using that. We'll use this analog machine in the corner. But you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a.
It could well be, but
when I think about all that stuff I've listened to of late, I think about that one Dave made us listen to, which sounded like Mortal Kombat, like at the start of the year. And when you listen to that, it's all hyper produced, but not hyper produced to the point where it sounds like, oh well, there's a point you would make before that there's not a human playing it. It's just that it's all very polished. The same way that like bands like I don't know if it's a Scandinavian thing either, and I don't want to.
I think it is, yeah.
But when I think about Soilwork and In Flames, those bands had a raw sound, and then when like they started taking off, their sounds became very fucking clean, super clean.
Yeah, like guitar wise on this, like it's very Scandinavian. Like it does, it's within that kind of Soilworky type sound as well. So I can see why they went for that sound, because it works with the style for me anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it did for me, to be honest. Like, the kind of music they're playing, I feel like it could have used a bit more of the human element for me, and I probably would have enjoyed it a bit more. I feel like it's just a bit too perfect and too clean, if you know what I mean. But if it's something of the genre, then it's just something I have to accept. But I mean, for me, it's just like I was listening to it, like it could have been a bit different there. Like that flute, I'm pretty sure it's a synth.
Well, yeah, unless they have a traveling flautist with someone
that could play every note perfectly. It's either, if it's a real flute, it's very, very hyper produced, or it's definitely a synth. I was like, he's all of Sweden. There could be a flute player, you know. So I don't know.
I like the idea of someone having a synth though, and actually finally using the flute sound.
I know.
And uses on a synth ever. So.
That'd be good. So it was up and down for me, but I mean, it had good moments like Bliss. That was a good song for the most part. Like, I enjoyed quite a lot of that. And the intro, I was like, oh, this is not what I remember from this band. And then the vocal came and I was like, this is what I remember from this band.
It reminds me a lot of that dude from Care of Night.
Yeah,
it's in that same sort of vein.
Like AOR kind of melodic rock
very
type stuff.
AOR actually. His vocals, and it almost sounds like he's, once again, it's one of those elements where that's maybe their strength, is taking those heavier guitars, the kind of twee like power metal elements, and AOR style vocals, and bringing them together and actually making them sound like they should all be together.
It's definitely a strength.
I can't say I've heard any other bands that sound kind of like Tungsten at all. Really, like I could pull elements from it and say, "Oh, that sounds like them." But not in one band, if you know what I mean. Which is pretty cool. Okay, so ratings for Bliss from Tungsten. Duncan, what are you thinking overall for this one?
I'm giving it a 4. Like I say, I came in expecting, from what I'd heard, to maybe score it a little bit higher, kind of hoping for about a 4.5. I personally think that there's maybe one or two elements, not necessarily too far, but just weirdly placed on the album, which to me doesn't give it the flow all the way through that I would like. But then I'm not in Tungsten, so I'll shut the fuck up. But yeah, like everything else about it is great. It's an album that you cannot not smile to whilst listening, even though I put a double negative in there. 4.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, 4 out of 5 from me. Great hooks, great riffs. Guy's got a killer vocal. Couple of tracks that were a bit too strong in the power metal and Celtic flavourings for me personally, but still very enjoyable album. So yeah, 4 out of 5 from me. Kyle?
Sounds like a Yankee candle, doesn't it? Celtic flavourings.
Yeah.
Spark up in the background. Sea salt and moss.
How am I meant to follow that up?
Sorry. Well, it's been weeks since we recorded. It has to come out.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in marginally below you guys at 3.5 for me.
Nice.
3.5. Nice. Okay, so Tungsten and Bliss out June 17th on A Rising Empire. Links below to the band's Facebook, any pre-orders. Let us know what you think. There's a few singles out that are already available on streaming platforms just now. Check them out. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think when you hear the album. Happy to hear your thoughts on it. That's the review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
One question before you hit stop, Dave. After listening to the album and giving it a review, are you sure you're happy with it?
Hoo-ha!
There we go. That'll do.
That'll do.
End the call, Dave.
Bye.
Bye. End it now.